"So this is your date?" Vanessa smirked, eyes scanning Rachel from head to toe. "Did you find her singing under a bridge?" Elias didn't answer. "Or maybe this is your latest investment, someone who knows how to pretend just as well as you do." The ballroom buzzed with laughter and glances. But later that night, everything changed. The young singer stood alone on a small stage, her eyes searching the crowd until they landed on him. And then his voice rang out, steady, raw. "You helped me pretend to love, but the only one who got fooled was me." He stepped forward, light pooling around his shoulders. "I thought I hired someone to act, but instead I found someone who made me believe in something real." Elias Monroe had built an empire on logic, precision, and control. As the CEO of a global investment firm, his world ran on numbers and strategy, neatly filed, well-planned, and entirely void of chaos. But no spreadsheet or quarterly report could have prepared him for the name that flashed across his phone one late Thursday afternoon. Vanessa Kingsley. He stared at the screen, jaw clenched. It had been 3 years since they last spoke. 3 years since she'd walked out of his penthouse with a trail of accusations and silence. For a moment he considered letting it ring out. But then, curiosity, or maybe defiance, made him answer. "Elias," her voice purred, smooth and confident as ever. "Still saving the world one soulless investment at a time?" "What do you want, Vanessa?" he said flatly, turning toward the vast window overlooking the skyline. "I thought you'd want to know," she began with exaggerated sweetness. "I'm getting engaged." He said nothing. "We're throwing a little celebration. Just friends, champagne, laughter. You know, things you don't believe in." His grip on the phone tightened. "You're invited, of course," she added airily. "It's been what, 3 years, and you still haven't managed to find someone new? Or are you so intolerable no woman can stand more than a coffee date with you?" "That's none of your business," he said coolly. "Oh, but it is," she replied, venom slipping behind her silk tone. "I told everyone you'd show up alone. It's your signature move, cold, unavailable, incapable of real connection." There was a pause, just long enough to hurt. "Unless," she added, a mock thoughtful lilt in her voice, "you surprise us all. Bring someone. That is, if anyone's willing to pretend they love you for a night." Click. The call ended, but her words stayed, echoing louder than the city's traffic. Elias stood frozen for a long moment, staring out at the skyline he once found grounding. But not tonight. Tonight it blurred behind the sting of humiliation. Vanessa hadn't just moved on. She was using him as a punchline. He refused to give her that satisfaction. She wanted a surprise. She'd get one. And Elias Monroe never entered a room without a strategy. The next morning, Elias Monroe walked aimlessly through Central Park. The sharp sting of Vanessa's words still echoed in his chest, louder than the sounds of the city. Normally, he'd bury himself in spreadsheets or boardroom strategy, but not today. Today, he needed air, stillness, something that made sense. That's when he heard it. A voice, unpolished but haunting. A melody raw and full of quiet longing, like it had been pulled straight from someone's soul. Elias followed the sound down a winding path, past dog walkers and joggers, until he saw her. She stood beneath a leaning lamppost, guitar slung low, singing to no one in particular. Her dark hair fell loosely over her denim jacket, scuffed boots, no makeup, nothing curated, just truth and a handful of dollar bills scattered in her guitar case. He didn't know why he stayed. Maybe it was the way she closed her eyes on the high notes. Maybe it was the sadness in her voice that mirrored something inside him. When the song ended, Elias stepped forward. "You have a voice," he said quietly. She looked up, guarded. "I have a name too. Rachel." He offered a small nod. "Elias." She studied him with subtle suspicion. "Finance?" He smirked. "Guilty." Rachel turned to pack her guitar. "I don't do requests, if that's what you're thinking." "I'm not here for a song," he replied. "I have a proposition." She froze. "If it's illegal, I'm not interested." "Not illegal, just unusual." He hesitated, then said it. "I need a date. For one evening. A party." Rachel raised a skeptical brow. "You want me, a total stranger, to be your date?" It's for my ex's engagement party, Elias admitted. She's expecting me to show up alone. I'd like to change that narrative. She laughed once, dry and sharp. Let me guess. You want me to play the mysterious new girlfriend to impress your ex? To outsmart her, he said simply. Rachel shook her head. I sing on sidewalks. I don't belong in rooms with chandeliers. That's exactly why she won't see you coming. Her eyes narrowed. What's in it for me? I'll pay you, he offered. Enough to help out. Maybe more. Still, she didn't bite. Then he added gently, I'll cover your mother's hospital bills. The color drained from her face. How do you know about that? I don't, he admitted. I saw your reaction when someone dropped a 5 in your case instead of a 1. Just a guess. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rachel exhaled. You're serious? I am, he said softly. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. All right, suit, but you'd better make it worth it. Elias allowed himself the smallest smile. Neither of them knew it yet, but that agreement, spoken under the autumn leaves, would change both of their lives forever. Elias didn't waste time. That same afternoon, he took Rachel to one of the most exclusive boutiques on Fifth Avenue. The moment they stepped through the door, Rachel froze. Crystal chandeliers hung like galaxies from the ceiling. Mirrors with gold trim reflected gowns that shimmered like starlight. Stylists flitted between racks of silk and chiffon, speaking in hushed tones and curated elegance. Rachel shifted uncomfortably in her worn boots. I don't belong in here, she muttered. Elias glanced at her. You're not here to belong. You're here to shine. She gave him a look but said nothing. The stylist clapped her hands together, delighted by the challenge, and began pulling dresses in every cut and color. Rachel tried on dozens, sleek silhouettes, flowing gowns, glittering bodices, but none felt right. Too tight, too loud, too much. Then they brought out one more, a deep forest green gown. No sequins, no fuss. Simple, elegant, and bold in its restraint. Rachel stepped out of the fitting room slowly, brushing her hands along the soft fabric. She turned to the full-length mirror and stilled. It didn't scream for attention. It simply fit. Elias stood up from the couch, his gaze fixed. That one, he said quietly. Rachel looked down at herself, then to him. Feels a little too princess. You're playing the part, Elias replied, but you still look like you. She gave a small nod, then reached into her satchel and pulled out a worn leather bracelet, frayed edges, faded color. She fastened it around her wrist. I'm keeping this on. My mom gave it to me. Elias simply nodded. It works. By the time they left the boutique, the city lights were beginning to flicker on. Elias glanced at his watch. I don't have time for dinner out, he said, but we could cook at my place. We still need to rehearse our story. Rachel raised a brow. You cook? I do. His apartment was just as she imagined. Sleek, modern, and meticulously organized. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline. The kitchen looked untouched, like it belonged in a magazine spread. Rachel stared at the pristine marble countertops. Are you sure you actually cook in here? Elias rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong, surprisingly scarred forearms. Used to cook every night when my mom was sick. It stuck. Rachel opened a drawer and blinked. You alphabetized your spices. Efficiency, he said with a slight smirk. She snorted. You're definitely a serial killer. While Elias chopped vegetables with practiced ease, Rachel tried to mimic him. Her knife slipped, sending onion slices flying. She yelped, backing up. Okay, I'm officially banned from sharp objects. Elias chuckled and stepped in behind her, gently guiding her hands. Like this. Firm grip. Curl your fingers. Rachel followed his lead, biting her lip as she tried again. The kitchen began to smell like something real. Garlic, herbs, fresh tomatoes. Something lived in. She sneezed from the onions, eyes watering. How do you do this without crying? Experience and emotional repression, he answered dryly. When she knocked over the salt jar, granules scattered across the counter. She groaned. Consider it extra flavor, Elias said. A little chaos added to a perfect plan. They ate at a small table by the window, city lights sparkling outside. Rehearsing their backstory between bites, Laughter snuck in. Lines blurred. Moments stretched. "So how did we meet?" Elias asked. Rachel grinned. "You found me under a bridge, remember?" He raised a glass of water. "To poverty, the reason we're not drinking wine. To pretending," she said more softly. But Elias looked at her for a long moment. "This doesn't feel like pretending." Rachel turned away, suddenly unsure of her footing. But the warmth between them lingered, and in the hush between laughs, something began to bloom, uncertain, unspoken, but impossible to ignore. The rooftop gala shimmered like a constellation in the night. Crystal chandeliers suspended above polished marble floors, violins humming softly over the buzz of champagne flutes in curated conversation. Everyone there glided like they belonged, shoulders squared, names on guest lists, smiles sharpened by pedigree. Rachel Hartman didn't. Though she wore the elegant navy gown selected by Elias's stylist, her feet felt heavy as she stepped through the grand entrance beside him. His hand rested gently on the small of her back, guiding her forward. But even that touch couldn't ease the knot tightening in her stomach. The moment they entered, heads turned. Whispers followed. "Is that—" Not exactly what I expected from Elias Monroe. "Must be some kind of charity case." Rachel tried to ignore them. She focused on her breath, on the soft hum of jazz, on the way Elias looked at her, not with pity or distance, but as if she were the only person in the room. But the smiles from others were different, calculated, thin. A woman in a crimson gown approached, her lips curled in politeness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So, Rachel, Elias tells me you're a singer?" Rachel offered a calm smile. "I am." "Oh, how charming," the woman replied, tilting her glass. "We need more authenticity these days." Then leaning slightly closer. "You must be quite the performance artist." Elias stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Rachel is more real than anyone in this room," he said evenly. Rachel touched his arm lightly. "Don't fight for me," her gesture said. "Not like this." Another guest chimed in. "How did you two meet?" Rachel took a slow breath. "He found me singing in the park." The room chuckled, not cruelly, but not kindly either. As the music swelled and couples began drifting to the dance floor, Rachel's heartbeat pounded like a drum out of sync. She looked around. Everything sparkled, everything smiled, but none of it felt real. "I need some air," she said quietly. She slipped through the glass doors onto the balcony. The cool night air wrapped around her like relief. Moments later, Elias joined her. "Rachel." She turned to him, eyes glassy. "This isn't my world, Elias," she whispered. "I don't know how to breathe in it." "I thought you might enjoy it," he said softly, stepping beside her. "I wanted you to see what it's like, being with me." She shook her head. "What I saw were cold lights, colder smiles. I felt like a conversation piece, like they were waiting for me to mess up just so they could laugh later." "You're not a joke." "I know," she said firmly. "But in that room, I'm not seen. Not truly. I'm just something new to talk about until they forget my name." He reached out for her hand, but she took a step back. "I need real things, Elias. A place where I can sing and mean it. Where people listen, not judge." He looked at her, his mouth parting, but no words came. No strategy, no fix. Just silence. She gave him a small, sad smile. "You belong in there." She paused. "I don't." Then, without waiting for his reply, Rachel turned and walked away. Elias watched her disappear into the darkened hallway, the hum of the party growing louder behind him. But all he could hear was the sound of her leaving. Rachel was gone, and Elias Monroe felt it like a physical absence, something heavy pressing against his chest that no meeting, no deadline, no billion-dollar acquisition could distract him from. He tried calling, straight to voicemail. He sent messages, nothing. He visited the bar where she used to sing on weekends, the cozy venue tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The owner shook his head sympathetically. "Haven't seen her since last week. Sorry, man." Elias walked through Central Park, tracing the same winding path where he'd first heard her sing under the old lamppost. It was quiet now. just wind in the trees and memories that wouldn't leave him alone. He stopped by the bookstore she once mentioned loving, the one that sold coffee and secondhand poetry books. No sign of her. The apartment building she had lived in was dark when he passed by. No music, no lights, just silence. Days passed, then nearly a week. Ilias began canceling meetings, missing calls. His assistant covered for him. Rumors swirled around the office. He's distracted, he's slipping, she's the reason. And maybe they were right. One late afternoon, Elias found himself sitting under the old oak tree in the park, the same one where Rachel had once said she didn't sing for fame, but so someone in the dark might feel a little less alone. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a sketch. It was a portrait Rachel had drawn of him, done quickly on a restaurant napkin the night they cooked together. But it wasn't the CEO she had drawn. It wasn't the man in suits and boardrooms. It was the Elias she had seen beneath all that. The one who stirred soup slowly, the one who smiled when no one was watching, the one who let her in. He ran his thumb along the edge of the paper, tracing the lines of her quiet gift. And then quietly, he whispered into the breeze, "I'm sorry. I let them speak louder than my heart." His voice cracked on the last word. For a man who had once believed control was the key to life, Elias had never felt more powerless. Rachel had slipped through his fingers like a melody he hadn't known how to hold. But sitting there in that quiet, something shifted. He folded the sketch carefully and slid it back into his coat. Then he stood, his jaw set, his eyes steady. "If you won't come back to me," he murmured to the sky, "then I'll come to you." Because Elias Monroe had built a world with strategy and power. But now, he was ready to build something real, with love. The city was alive that Saturday afternoon. Streamers fluttered between lampposts, children ran with painted faces, and booths lined the sidewalks for the community charity festival. But Elias wasn't there for the festivities. He had wandered aimlessly for hours, driven by a quiet ache he no longer tried to suppress. He didn't have a plan, only a name in his heart and the desperate hope that the city might lead him back to her. Then he heard it, that voice, soft, steady, soulful. His feet froze before his mind did. On a small stage beneath a canopy of ivy and fairy lights stood Rachel, hair swept to the side, wearing a simple blue dress. Her old bracelet caught the sunlight as her fingers danced along her guitar. She wasn't dressed to impress. She wasn't trying to dazzle. She was just singing, and it was beautiful. The crowd around her stood still, mesmerized. But Elias saw no one else. He stepped forward slowly, parting the audience one careful footstep at a time. Rachel opened her eyes and saw him. Her voice caught for just a moment, but she kept singing. When the final note faded into the summer air, silence lingered like breath held too long. Elias took one step closer and, with a voice clear and unwavering, spoke into the hush. "I asked you to pretend to love me, but the only one who got fooled was me. You made me laugh. You made me feel. You reminded me of the man I used to be, the man I forgot I could be." Gasps echoed softly around them. Rachel stared down at him, eyes shimmering. Elias raised his gaze, bare and vulnerable for the first time in years. "I thought I was hiring someone to play a role, but instead, I found someone who made me believe in something real." Rachel didn't speak. She didn't need to. She stepped down from the stage, one step, then another, until she was close enough to touch him. And then she did. She fell into his arms, holding him tightly, her tears soaking quietly into his shirt. Around them, the crowd erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it clearly, because in that moment, there were no performances, no pretending, no doubts. Just two hearts, finally speaking the same truth. The warehouse space used to be empty, just cold concrete and echoing walls. Now it pulsed with music, Rachel's music corner. That's what the hand-painted sign read above the door. Inside, the air was filled with laughter, rhythm, and mismatched melodies. Children sat cross-legged on colorful rugs, holding ukuleles too big for their arms, tapping drums with wide-eyed wonder, humming as Rachel guided them through every note. She didn't charge them, not 1 cent. Some of the children came from shelters. Some barely had shoes that fit. But none of them were ever turned away, because Rachel remembered what it was like to be unheard, and she had vowed never to let another child feel invisible. What most didn't know was that every instrument, every music stand, every string of lights had been quietly paid for by Elias Monroe. No checks signed with flashy names, no press releases. He never once asked for credit. He only asked to be allowed to help in the background, where love didn't need applause. Their new home was modest, just 2 rooms and a little balcony overlooking the park where they first met. It didn't have a view of the skyline. It didn't need one. Every evening, they'd cook together. Elias would chop vegetables like he always had. Rachel, still reckless with kitchen tools, would sing while flipping pancakes too early and laughing when they collapsed. They wrote songs at the kitchen table, Rachel humming, Elias scribbling words he never imagined he had inside him. Most of them never made it to paper. Many ended in laughter or late-night takeout, but all of them stitched their lives together, moment by messy, magical moment. Rachel still wore her mother's old leather bracelet every day. She never took it off, not even during performances. Elias, once the immovable force in any boardroom, had changed. He still wore tailored shirts and still answered emails, but now he paused to listen, to breathe, to feel, because Rachel hadn't just entered his world. She had rebuilt it, and every time he watched her teach a child to strum their first chord or caught her singing while washing dishes, he knew something with quiet certainty. He had once hired a woman to pretend to love him. Now, he was spending the rest of his life making sure she never had to pretend again. The summer evening was warm, the kind that wrapped the city in a golden hush. Paper lanterns swayed gently between tree branches as families laid out picnic blankets and children chased fireflies near the stage. The community concert was small, just a modest gathering in the park. But to Elias Monroe, it felt bigger than any gala he'd ever attended. He sat quietly in the middle row. No tuxedo, no entourage, just jeans, a folded program, and a heart that no longer needed armor. The makeshift wooden stage was barely elevated, strung with fairy lights and framed by ivy. No elaborate lighting rigs, no velvet curtains, just music and open sky. Rachel stepped into the glow, holding her guitar close. She wore a simple dress and that same leather bracelet she never took off. Her hair was loose, curling slightly from the summer humidity. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The hush that fell over the crowd spoke for her. She looked out into the sea of faces and found him instantly, their eyes locked. She smiled. It wasn't the nervous smile of a woman pretending to fit in. It was the smile of someone who had finally come home, to herself, to her voice, and to the man who had once almost lost her. Rachel adjusted the mic and strummed the first chord. The song was new, one they had written together, scribbled late at night on their tiny kitchen table, between spilled tea and half-finished lyrics. It wasn't about heartbreak or fear or even longing. It was about stillness, about finding a place to land. Her voice floated gently over the field, a lullaby to the tired and the hopeful. People leaned in. Couples held hands. Children stopped playing. The world, for a few quiet minutes, just listened. Elias watched her, barely blinking. He didn't see the crowd. He didn't see the lights. He saw her. The woman who once sang to strangers on a sidewalk, who taught him how to feel again. Not through grand gestures, but through honesty, through laughter, through a kind of quiet bravery he had never known existed. As the final note lingered in the air, the crowd erupted into heartfelt applause. Rachel bowed softly, and Elias thought, she used to be the voice that made me stop in my tracks. Now she's the reason I never want to walk away again. There was no spotlight, no press, no spectacle. Just love, real, steady, and finally at peace. And though the song had ended, their story was just beginning. In a world obsessed with appearances, status, and curated perfection, Elias and Rachel's story reminds us of something quietly powerful. Real love doesn't need to perform. It simply shows up, listens, and stays. We live in a time where relationships can feel rushed, transactional, or lost in digital noise. But sometimes the most meaningful connections are found in the most unexpected places, on park benches and shared meals, or in the courage to simply be honest. Rachel never changed who she was to fit into Elias's world. Instead, she showed him how to create a new one. together. That's a reminder we all need, especially in today's fast-paced, image-driven culture. So here's what we'd love to know from you. Have you ever met someone who changed your perspective on life? Do you believe that love can truly bridge two very different worlds? Or maybe, are you still waiting for your Rachel or Elias moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories inspire others more than you know. And to our older viewers, thank you for staying with us. These stories aren't just for the young. They're for anyone who's ever loved, lost, and hoped again. If this story moved your heart, made you reflect, or even brought a quiet smile to your face, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who still believes in love's second chances. Here at Warm Soul Stories, we tell tales that gently remind us it's never too late for a new beginning. Sometimes pretending leads us to the truth, and love, real love, is always worth the risk. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep your heart open.